Welcome back to Leading Edge. Good to have you along today. Domestic violence was already, let's face it, a huge problem this country was facing even before the pandemic. And now we can say, as we do about so many things lately, COVID only made it worse. Now, heads up, a statistic incoming here. But on average, nearly 20 people a minute, 20 people a minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the US. 20 a minute, that's more than 10 million a year. My next guests know the problem well, and I'm glad to say are doing something about it. I'll have you wave when I give your names. Kathy Mull is the executive director. Kathy, it's your time to wave. There we go. Of the Cocoon Center in Wood County, the executive director, which in its own words provides safety, healing, and justice to survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Robin Guidera helps raise support for the Cocoon, the only comprehensive domestic and sexual violence agency in Wood County. Also works, as she is today, to get that word out. Caroline Lippert is also working to support the Cocoon and is doing so in a most unique way that you folks may want to join. This is wild, but interesting stuff. Welcome all. Good to see you all. Kathy, I like to research my subjects, even if what I learn sometimes is a little tough to deal with. In one article, while it was expected that with everyone holed up at home, that calls to domestic violence shelters would go up, but one study said, actually, they found the opposite, that it went down, but in so doing, likely exposed the problem by doing so. What are you guys finding?
For us at the Cocoon, we actually have experienced the opposite of that. So COVID has really created an uptick in calls for us. But one of the things that we've been looking at across the state is it does seem that there are sort of two experiences that programs like ours are experiencing. So some programs across the state have absolutely been experiencing what you just shared, in that their calls have gone down. And for a lot of those reasons is that it was harder for folks to reach out for help. We've actually seen the opposite in terms of what we've experienced, in that right in the beginning of COVID, when the stay-at-home order started going in place, hard to believe almost a year ago now, that our domestic violence calls jumped 40% from folks looking for assistance.
Which was the worry going in. And when I say earlier that even a decline in phone calls underscores a problem, when you're holed up, when you don't have contact outside, if you're in trouble, Robin Guidera, and there's nobody to talk to out there, or maybe even using the telephone is not an option to you because the problem is right over there. That's why some people think the calls in some cases went down. Robin, we also have kids at home going nowhere in many cases because they're learning at home. There's an additional level of pressure there. Parents at varying levels of participation and leadership involvement with their kids. The tools and technology available is maybe very unequal among families out there. Have you seen, Robin, the stay-at-home existence that so many of us have endured in the past year affecting kids and their parents during this time?
Certainly, when you're in a situation, you're in a home where there is already, abuse going on, the added stressors of all being confined in the same space, probably not used to having children in the home 24/7, does tend to exacerbate an already potentially volatile situation.
I want to get Caroline Lippert in here because she's embarking on something that is, what you have to hear it to believe it. And I don't want to spend too much. I want to talk about that, Caroline. But you also, as a person, as a youngster, you were exposed to, you witnessed, and I was reading 1 in 15 children in this country, how about this, folks, are exposed to intimate partner violence. When I say exposed to, 90% of them are flat out eyewitnesses. All I know, before, to set the stage, Caroline, before we talk about what you're doing for the Cocoon, what drew you to this organization, I know you told me, was the fact that they also deal with that emotional side that it hangs out there. Even after you get out of a domestic abusive situation, it's out there. And if you don't address it, it can affect you forever and certainly for years.
Yes, I think that's what made me fall in love with the Cocoon, is the healing aspect of them. And actually having an advocate when you have to do the hard stuff, like go to court. And there's some people that don't have that support system. So I fell in love with them because I myself, as a child, watched my mom in an abusive relationship, and the abuser trickled down to us kids also. But just to know that there's something like the Cocoon out there that is going to overall get them out of a really bad situation, but also help in the healing process of the family and the individuals is what made me fall in love with them.
Kathy Mull, the executive director, domestic violence. When I say it, some people, it affects, well, what it is one partner physically hurting another in one way or another. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, he hit her. That's domestic violence. And it is. But frankly, it also takes on many different forms, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think you're right. The first thing that we think about when we think about domestic violence is, the black eyes or the broken bones or the physical violence. But what we know that happens even more often is emotional abuse. And so it's a lot of tearing down the self-esteem of the survivor. It's the isolation that we see that happens, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier in cutting off ways for survivors to get help. It's the financial abuse. It's controlling all of the finances in the home, which makes it difficult for survivors to be financially stable. The verbal abuse, the name calling, the put downs, all of those types of things are very common in domestic violence situations. And what that does is it helps the abuser in the household gain and then maintain and hold on to control, and makes it much more difficult for the family to be able to navigate what's happening in the home.
Well, the Cocoon is in existence now for what? 15 years in running.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember when you were formed, and it just doesn't seem all that long ago, but they're there providing that shelter, that safety, that support. I need to take a break. We talked about Ms. Lippert up there in the corner is going to be doing something that you need to hear about, and you will when we continue on Leading Edge.